A poem should not mean, but be.
The various machines that have been constructed in the course of the preceding year for the purpose of creating content to be released monthly in the form of a lecture were developed in response to, among other dilemmas, the operator's experience of a formal crisis. That is, a crisis related to the forms his writing, or more importantly, the writing he felt was being most insistently proffered to him, kept wanting to take, which he believed too easily migrated from form to formula, and which he feared were facilitating, if not always untruth, then predigested truths, truths that went down too easily, and so, of course, needed to be addressed at the formal level by putting pressure on form and his relationship to form. And this resulted in forms that weren't forms, but processes that would suggest a series of temporary contingent forms, which processes he called machines due to the necessity of having a word to refer to it. Although this has led to periods of confusion even for the operator, because the machines can hardly be said to exist since, in essence, the machines should not be, but work.
The dancer translates into the speech of motion a meditation on passion or reality. Metaphysics are translated into techniques by choreography. But at each instant of the dance, the forms and eloquence of gesture engender new insights, new mythologies. Delight, born of the mind, passes into the upward surge of the body. But the formal style, the never-to-be-repeated particularities of the gesture, are in themselves creators of myth and ecstasy.
The machines were designed with the understanding that their principal function would be to process language at a more granular level than is normally practiced on prose.
I'm not a theologian or a physician or a psychiatrist. I'm a writer, which means that I aim myself at all those things, but fall short at all of them most of the time. Writers fall short at everything except creating sentences. This is what we really like to do. Put words in an order which can conjure something real but unseen in the air around us, and around you when you read what we have put down. Really, this business of sentences is the only thing we can do and the only thing that motivates us. All the rest, the stories, the characters, the metaphors, the morals, and the messages, they come later with varying degrees of success. Everything is built on the sentences. We just love sentences, and we can't get proper jobs.
In what way have the results of working language through the machines been revelatory? This process has resulted in diminishing the existential motivation of the sentence and foregrounding its essential purpose to such an extent as to defamiliarize sentences and the act of sentence making more generally. Since in nearly every case, the existential motivation of a sentence is to conduct a reader from the previous sentence to the one that will follow, while also imparting units of information to the reader. And this function has been de-emphasized in various ways by the procedure determined by the machines. And yet it is important to note that this experience on the part of the operator is independent of the listener's experience of the final lecture, just as walking through a hallway would still feel like walking through a hallway for the walker, whether or not there were rooms on either side of it. Whereas constructing a hallway that wasn't intended to be an area of communication between smaller units of space within a larger containing space would likely prove to be a confounding proposition for the builder.
Nobody writes for money, power, fame, or sex, none of which writing is likely to get you anywhere near, at least for long. It's the blazing, the burning. It's the intensity of being, of love, of sorrow, joy, grief, brokenness, loss. It's the aching of all that is short and will soon be washed away. You have your one brief, tiny life. You have your pen. Can you convey the heat of it? The way that every cell burns with the true light when you realize, in some tremendous moment, some kiss, some death, some echo across a midnight lake, the high, thin, oxygenless truth of being here, of living. Can you even get a sliver of that onto a page? That is what you came for. Everything else is flotsam. Everything else can be shrugged away on the tide. Get it down, capture it. There is nothing else.
Content freed from the obligations of received form, must be purified in the crucible of its truest expression, or risk wafting off into the ether.
Writing in its noblest function is the attempt to unerase, to unearth, to find the primitive picture again, ours, the one that frightens us.
Personal reflection, as well as casual observation, indicate that a writer may perform an act of writing, even perhaps worthwhile and important writing, without its affecting their soul. But one needs only the evidence of the progress of these 12 Corona lectures to understand that, regardless of whether the result has been net gain or net loss, the machines have done their work on the operator.
That which now absorbs the time and the life of Pierre is not the book, but the primitive elementalizing of the strange stuff which in the act of attempting that book have upheaved and upgushed in his soul. 2 books are being writ, of which the world shall only see one, and that the bungled one. The larger book, and the infinitely better, is for Pierre's own private shelf. That it is whose unfathomable cravings drink his blood. The other only demands his ink. But circumstances have so decreed that the one cannot be composed on the paper, but only as the other is writ down in his soul.
For when the will works in isolation, it turns of necessity to dictionary studies, syntactical tricks, intellectual formulae, memory, history, and convention. Any source of material, that is, which can imitate the fruits of imagination without actually allowing them to emerge.
The machines have certainly helped the operator produce content during quarantine. The question is whether the operator may have confused the need for content with the desire for contentment. The problem with contentment is it was no match for this burning inside him, the fire having already been lit. What the operator needed was something to contend with that flame, not feed it. The operator believes that hard work and focus will eventually bear fruit, that discipline and determination will pay off, that a solitary pursuit might have relevance to others. Thinks declaring his errors forgives them, mistakes ingress for progress, reveals a shameful earnestness despite his every effort, distrusts his imagination, tries to demolish obstacles that may more easily be slid past, sells short the virtue of a light touch, forgets the value of play, and exhibits an altogether too stubborn faith in the doctrines that have landed him here, a place he knows is untenable. Should we be surprised when the operator builds machines that produce content with the very same flaws?
What an amazing dream that was. Jesus, I'm so sorry. I woke up. In the dream, Michael Stipe was recording my album with me. And it was just like, he just was working with me on everything. Quitting smoking and taking care of my voice and singing with me. We were working on we were just coming up with overall sounds and learning my preferences. And God, it was really awesome. We were just working with visual images and soundscapes and just getting my tastes together and trying to figure out a concept. I think the next thing we were going to do was come up with cover art. And it was awesome because I knew how big a deal he was, Michael Stipe. And I kept thinking when's his assistant going to take over or whatever. And he kept not taking over. And he was being so warm and gentle and encouraging.
Art is the means we have of undoing the damage of haste. It's what everything else isn't.
Don't think I'm going to try to define what art is. It would be easier to take art away and see what's left. The problem is, I worry that too many people already have.
This is what it is to love an artist. The moon is always rising above your house. The houses of your neighbors look dull and lacking in moonlight, but he is always going away from you. Inside his head, there is always something more beautiful.
Envision the infinite marketplace. Art skulks in its shadows. When love is a merchant, beauty is a constable. Look then for art in the jailhouse, the gutter, the underworld. It isn't the artist that sows beauty, but beauty which draws forth the artist.
Of course it is beautiful, but first all beauty in it is denied, and then all beauty of it is accepted. If everyone were not so indolent, they would realize that beauty is beauty even when it is irritating and stimulating, not only when it is accepted and classic.
Ramon Fernandez, tell me, if you know, why, when the singing ended and we turned toward the town, tell why the glassy lights, the lights in the fishing boats at anchor there, as the night descended, tilting in the air, mastered the night and portioned out the sea, fixing emblazoned zones and fiery poles, arranging, deepening, enchanting night.
Smoking a cigarette treats anxiety in the sense that the need for nicotine creates a sensation akin to anxiety, which can be temporarily alleviated by the consumption of nicotine, while obviously not addressing any of the underlying causes of anxiety. Similarly, art seems occasionally able to create or impose order upon the chaos of living because the stuff art is made from, upon which a competent artist is able to impose a suitable form in order to create the effect of balance, can be made to seem symbolically analogous to the stuff life is made up of. And so an aesthetic satisfaction may at times strike us as ontological. Art works on the world by working on the self.
Don't misunderstand me. A novel is no more supposed to be a guidebook to universal happiness than a self-indulgent journal of the writer's personal pain. And everyone will agree, I think, that crime is a more fascinating subject than lawful behavior, that dysfunction is more interesting than stability, that a messy divorce is ever so much more titillating than a placid marriage. Without conflict, both fiction and life can be a bore. Should that, however, prohibit the serious author from exploring and even extolling the world's pleasures, wonders, mysteries, and delights?
It is because we shut our eyes to the delight of the world that we need art to shock us into opening them to its wonders.
If the book we are reading does not wake us, as with a fist hammering on our skull, why then do we read it? So that it shall make us happy? Good God! We would also be happy if we had no books, and such books as make us happy we could, if need be, write ourselves. But what we must have are those books which come upon us like ill fortune, and distress us deeply, like the death of one we love better than ourselves. Like suicide. A book must be an ice axe to break the frozen sea inside us.
This desire I have to disconcert you, to wound you, is more than unsavory. This hope that you will take me by the hand and join me in a journey across often barren country, so that we might stand at the edge of the chasm and become familiar with the abyss. Or turn together, back toward the home you have made for yourself, to see that it has been lit ablaze such that no return is possible. It borders on, when it doesn't skip giddily into, cruelty. And yet I know how many extended hands I have duly taken, how often I have felt ungentle fingers thrust my face toward the flames, and have wanted to fall to my knees in gratitude. It isn't the pain we want, but the wound it leaves behind. How can we trust we are living except through the reckoning of our wounds?
The temptation of art, a temptation to which every work of art yields except the greatest ones, is to console.
Books carry the forbidden knowledge and the true. Books are weird things, inhuman things, abstract things, but they are gateways at their best to the world to which the drum and the fire and the sweat lodge used to take us, the other world. At her best, the writer is a shaman, a priestess, a summoner.
Can you hear the druids whispering through the trees, the priests prophesying in the licking of the flames? It is not that there is no longer redemption. The mystics of a million faiths evangelize for your soul. If you walk through the marketplace, plug up your ears, for the loudest creeds are not the truest. Religions need to fill their churches. Doctrines depend on volume. Orthodoxy can only relieve your burden of freedom in a crowd. But faith is quieter than the sound of sunlight hitting birch leaves. Careless footsteps or the beating of an anxious heart are enough to drown it out.
Full many a gem of purest ray serene the dark unfathomed caves of ocean bear. Full many a flower is born to blush unseen and waste its sweetness on the desert air.
So tell me where the art lives. An artist may feel the agony of real struggle in making their art, the demand upon their every faculty, joy when the muse is smiling upon them, and despair when she is not, may catch glimpses of eternity and intimations of the hand of providence. And this may be where the art lives. Or it may have a home in itself, in its existence as an object or experience in the world, untethered from the artist's intentions and the audience's interpretation. Or it may live at the point of contact, where the art and the soul of the reader, listener, or viewer touch, living the lifespan of a spark. Or all of these are perhaps only prefatory to art's true life, which is when, after a genuine encounter, it bears its fruit in the human soul. There must be someone who knows this answer. Perhaps it wouldn't matter if I knew. Art can never be the only concern in the end, however much I might want it to be, as there is this burning to be quenched and life to be got through. But perhaps, if pursued diligently and worded correctly, the questions themselves may be a liturgy, the doubt an offering to the anxious gods, living in uncertainty my propitiation.